Said it's KP Video News, y'all. It's KP Video News.
KP's Video News, y'all. All right, folks. And I'm doing this show right here. It's a special Juneteenth celebration, and congratulations on all you people out there that already know about it. But doing this for the people that don't know what Juneteenth is. And this is something that's been celebrated a long time. That's right. Since 1865. So, regardless of what the DC dunce is trying to claim, it's just like a real, well, the celebration started in 1866 because 1865 was the date that, with so-called slaves basically were freed. And those are the people that were put in bondage in this country, that built this country. And so therefore, it's also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and Liberation Day. That's right. It's our holiday. It's the official Texas state holiday, celebrated annually on the 19th of June in the United States to commemorate the Union Army General Jordan Granger announcing federal orders in the city of Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, proclaiming that all slaves in Texas were now free, although the Emancipation Proclamation had formally freed them almost 2.5 years earlier. And the American Civil War had largely ended with the defeat of the Confederate States in April. Texas was the most remote of the slave states with a low presence of Union troops, so enforcement of the proclamation had been slow and inconsistent. The common misconception is that this day marks the end of slavery in the United States, although this day marks the emancipation of all slaves in the Confederacy. The institution of slavery was still legal and existed in the Union border states after June 19, 1865. Slavery in the United States did not officially end until the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States on December 6, 1865, which abolished slavery entirely in the United States and territories. Celebrations date to 1866, at first involving church-centered community gatherings in Texas. It spread across the South and became more commercialized in the 1920s and 1930s, often centering on a food festival during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. It was eclipsed by the struggle for post-war civil rights, but grew in popularity again in the 1970s with a focus on African American freedom and arts. By the 21st century, Juneteenth was celebrated in most major cities across the United States. Activists are campaigning for the United States Congress to recognize Juneteenth as a national holiday. Juneteenth is recognized as a state holiday or a special holiday observance in 49 of the 50 states. Modern observance is primarily in location celebrations. Traditions include public readings of the Emancipation Proclamation, singing traditional songs, and reading of works by African American writers such as Ralph Ellison and Maya Angelou. Celebrations include rodeos, street fairs, cookouts, family reunions, park parties, historical reenactments, and a Miss Juneteenth contest. And the Muskogos, descendants of the Black Seminoles of Chihuahua, Mexico, also celebrate Juneteenth. Black Seminoles, now remember that. Black Seminoles, that was black Indians that were, these people are already here before the European invaders got here. It was already black people here. It was black Aborigines. And these are the black Seminoles are just one of those black Indian groups. And during the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd, 1862. It was formally issued on January 1st, 1863, declared that all enslaved persons in the Confederate States of America is in rebellion and not in Union hands were to be freed. More isolated geographically, planters and other slaveholders had migrated into Texas from eastern states to escape the fighting, and many brought enslaved people with them, increasing by the thousands the enslaved population of the state at the end of the Civil War. Although most lived in rural areas, more than 1,000 resided in both Galveston and Houston by 1860, with several hundred in other large towns. By 1865, there were an estimated 250,000 people in Texas, enslaved people in Texas. The news of General Robert E. Lee's surrender in 1865 reached Texas later in the month. The Western Army of the Trans-Mississippi did not surrender until June 2nd, and on June 18th, Union Army General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston Island with 2,000 federal troops to occupy Texas on behalf of the federal government. The following day, standing on the balcony of the Galveston's Ashton Villa, Granger read aloud the contents of the General Order Number 3, announcing the total emancipation to those held as slaves. And it read like this: the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation of the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and the rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. Although this event is popularly thought of as the end of slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to those enslaved in Union-held territory who would not be freed until the proclamation several months later, in December 18, 1865, that the 13th Amendment had been ratified in December 6, 1865. The freedom of formerly enslaved people in Texas was given legal status in a series of Texas Supreme Court decisions between 1868 and 1874. And the early celebrations, formerly enslaved people in Galveston celebrated after the announcement. The following year, freedmen in Texas organized the first of what became the annual celebration of Jubilee Day on June 19th. Early celebrations, that was in June 19th in 1866. Early celebrations were used as political rallies to give voting instructions to the newly freed slaves. Early independence celebrations often occurred on January 1st or the 4th. In some cities, black people were barred from using public parks because of the state-sponsored segregation of facilities. Across parts of Texas, free people pooled their funds to purchase land to hold their celebrations. The day was first celebrated in Austin in 1867 under the auspices of the Freedmen's Bureau, and it has been listed on the calendar of public events by 1872. That year, black leaders in Texas raised $1,000 for the purchase of 10 acres of land to celebrate Juneteenth, known as Houston's Emancipation Park. The observation was soon drawing thousands of attendees across Texas, and an estimated 30,000 black people celebrated at Booker T. Washington Park in Limestone County, Texas, established in 1898 for Juneteenth celebrations. By the 1890s, Jubilee Day had become known as Juneteenth. In the early 20th century, economic and political forces led to the decline in Juneteenth celebrations. From 1890 to 1808, Texas and former Confederate states passed new constitutions or amendments that effectively disenfranchised black people, excluding them from the political process. White-dominated state legislated, they passed Jim Crow laws imposing second-class status on black people, and so that led to the decline in the celebration, and but they were ashamed of their slaves' past, and those so-called upwardly mobile blacks, house Negroes, and aspired to assimilate into the mainstream culture. Younger generations of blacks, become further removed from slavery, were occupied with school and other pursuits. Others who migrated to the northern United States couldn't take time off or simply dropped the celebration. And the Great Depression forced many blacks off farms and into the cities to find work. In these urban environments, Americans had difficulty taking the day off to celebrate. The second Great Migration began during World War II, when many black people migrated to the West Coast, where skilled jobs in the defense industry were opening up. A revival of Juneteenth began right before World War II began. From 1936 to 1951, the Texas State Fair served as a destination for celebrating the holiday, contributing to its revival. In 1936, an estimated 150 to 200,000 people joined the holiday celebration in Dallas in 1938. And so 70,000 people attended a Juneteenth Jamboree in 1951. And from 1940 to 1970, a second wave of the Great Migration, more than 5 million black people left Texas, Louisiana, and other parts of the South for the North and the West Coast. As historian wrote, the people from Texas took Juneteenth Day to Los Angeles, Oakland, Seattle, and other places as they went. In 1941, Juneteenth was introduced in San Francisco by an immigrant from Texas, Wesley Johnson. During the 50s and the 60s, the Civil Rights Movement focused the attention of African Americans on expanding freedom and integration. As a result, observation of the holiday declined again. Though it was still celebrated regionally in Texas, it soon saw a revival as black people began tying their struggle to that of ending slavery. In Atlanta, some campaigners for equality wrote Juneteenth buttons. During the 1968 Poor People's Campaign to D.C., called by Reverend Ralph Abernathy, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference made June 19 the Solidarity Day of Poor People's Campaign. In the subsequent revival, large celebrations in Minneapolis and Milwaukee emerged, as well as across the eastern United States. In 1974, Houston began holding large celebrations again. Fort Worth, Texas followed with the next year. Around 30,000 people attended festivals at Sycamore Park in Fort Worth in the following year. The 1978 Milwaukee celebration was described as drawing over 100,000 attendees. And so in late 1970s, the state legislature of Texas declared Juneteenth a holiday of significance. And right now in Congress, I believe they're getting ready to come to the floor and within the next few days and try to declare Juneteenth a national holiday. This has nothing to do with the D.C. dunce, so don't believe that lie he's telling on TV, talking about if it wasn't for him, Juneteenth wouldn't be. No, they've been celebrating this for over 150 years. And also as a city on the West Coast that I want to mention as an honorable mention, and that's the city called Allensworth, California. And the reason why Allensworth is I'm bringing Allensworth up is because usually every year they have a Juneteenth celebration, and it's in Tulare County, California, and it sits about and it was a town that was founded in 1908 with the idea that African Americans could own property, learn, thrive, and live the American dream. It was named by Lieutenant Colonel Allen Allensworth, now designated Colonel Allensworth State Historical Park. The community is located in kind of like in lower, kind of like it's like on Southern California, across from Bakersfield, California. Colonel Allen Allensworth, a retired clergyman from the all-black 24th Infantry Regiment, along with William Alexander Payne and 3 other black settlers, established the town to be the first in California to be founded, financed, and governed by blacks. Allensworth's reputation drew many from all over the country to the town, causing some to buy property sight unseen in order to support the efforts. In the 20th century, the area boasted a great boom and hosted California's first African American schools district by 1910. With the death of Colonel Allensworth in 1914, the town experienced extreme losses coupled with severe drought and decreased crop yields. Many residents left the area following World War I, and the town of Allensworth was scheduled for demolition in 1966 when arsenic was found in the water supply. The town was memorialized as a state park in 1974 and hosts events annually to preserve its history. So I mentioned that Allensworth as a place that they usually have a real nice Juneteenth celebration. And however, I don't know if they're going to do one this year because of the coronavirus and all the COVID-19 situation. So as soon as all this stuff is, hopefully we can get back to reality, man, and some semblance of normalcy, and we can start doing these celebrations again. But I'm doing this celebration here, and I did this so I can turn all you people on that don't really truly know the history of Juneteenth and why it was even started in the first place. And basically, in a nutshell, that was Juneteenth happened a year after the Emancipation Proclamation and the freedom. They were, the slaves in Texas, Galveston, Texas, were they didn't know that they were free for a whole year. Those people kept them in bondage for a whole year, and it wasn't until the Union Army came and read the proclamation, letting them know that they were indeed free men and free women. And I guess they, if they didn't come along and do what they did, they would have kept them in slavery for more years. And it's a sad situation, man. You got to know the real true history of the United States. You got to know the real true history. And if you don't know the true history, then you don't know the truth.
I said it's KP Video News, y'all. It's KP Video News.
Peace.